Welcome back, quilting friends. Today I have the fun of sharing a Peachy Keen trunk show with all of you. This fun stack of quilts right here we're going to be talking about. If you have been following along on my channel for any length of time, you know that I've been on a little bit of a scrappy quilt kick, and today's quilts are no exception. When I was designing the patterns for these quilts, I wanted to design some different options for all of you that you could utilize your scraps, or you could use pre-cuts from the Peachy Keen fabric collection. I'm excited to share these quilts with you, so stick around. This first quilt I'm sharing with you today is called Scrap Basket Stars. It is designed to utilize a fat eighth bundle of fabric. Those are the little baby sister to the fat quarter bundles, and such a fun pre-cut to work with. The size on this is 60 inches by 72 inches, making it a very nice throw-sized quilt. Here is Scrap Basket Stars up close. As you can see, it is just a wonderful, scrappy riot of color. These fabrics are Peachy Keen fabrics. If you did not see the video I shared where I showed all of the prints in Peachy Keen, I will have that linked below so that you can find that video easily. These fabrics will be available this fall in quilt shops, both locally and online. All of the patterns are currently available in my Etsy shop. I have them in either PDF or pattern or paper pattern formats. All of these new quilts were quilted by David Hurd of Quilting by David, and I will have his information linked below, as well as the names of all of the quilting designs that I am going to share with you today. This quilting design is called iCat 4. It's the first time that we used this design on one of my quilts, and I think it really highlights the quilt pattern so nicely. I love the scale of the quilting on this one. If I slide this over just a little bit, you can see I used this sweet little ditzy print for the border. This is one of the fabrics I have really been enjoying from Peachy Keen. It comes in a variety of colors, and I love it in each color that it comes in. It worked really well for this border. It's a smaller scale than I would often use for a border, but I really like the way it framed out the quilt. But you can see in the quilt itself how nicely that scale works for patchwork. These are some of the other colors that it is available in. For the binding, it is the blue striped fabric. Now, if that is not showing up as a stripe on your screen, I will also link to where I have shared photos of this fabric line on my blog so that you can see the fabrics a little bit better. When I shared the Peachy Keen fabrics, some of you mentioned that on your screen it was showing up more as a solid rather than reading as a stripe. It's such a fine bias stripe that, depending on how you're viewing this video, it may look more like a solid. For the backing, we used the bouquet fabric on that beautiful coral color. Now, if you wanted to use your scrap bin to make this quilt, it is going to use 396 2.5-inch squares, and then you would also need 178 3-inch squares, and you could easily make this from your scrap bin. That would be for all of the prints, and then you would just need to add your background fabric, border, binding, and backing. But it makes a great scrap busting quilt because it is made mostly of those 3-inch and 2.5-inch squares. This quilt behind me now is Hourglass Scraps, and it's another great scrap busting quilt. This is going to use a whole bunch of 2.5-inch squares. If you have 2.5-inch squares sitting in your scrap bin that you need a project to use them on, this is a great one to do that for. Now, this is also the most time-consuming to piece of all of the new patterns. It is wonderfully scrappy and just a riot of color, but it does take a fair amount to piece. The way that I've constructed these blocks is a fun technique. It may look like it's composed of flying geese, but it's not, and it comes together in such a fun way. This quilt also finishes at 60 by 72, and it can be pieced with a jelly roll or a layer cake, or of course those scrappy squares. And it looks like we have a visitor who came up to say hi. So those of you Tiggs fans, he just came in from outside and he's saying hi. It's snowing out today, so he may stay in a little bit longer. I don't know if he's gonna hang out on our quilts here today. He seems to be settling in really nicely on my Scrap Basket Stars quilt right now, so we'll see how long he sticks around. I do want to take the quilt down behind me though and bring it down here so that you can see the quilting on that. Maybe you're gonna get another view of Tiggs when we do that. Well, no more Kitty on this one. He hopped down when we switched the quilts, but he might just make another appearance. We'll have to see. This quilting design is called a Baptist fan, and we've used this quilting design on a number of different quilts throughout the years, and I always think that it really highlights a quilt so nicely. It's a very traditional quilting pattern, and I think it just sets off this traditional quilt design really well. The borders on this quilt, as we slide this over, you'll see I've used that little calico print again, as well as the large scale floral on the darker blue. The binding is the coral stripe, and then for the backing, it is the medium blue bouquets. Now, if you wanted to scrap basket this quilt up, you would need 640 2.5-inch squares, making it a wonderful scrap busting quilt. And then of course you would need your background fabric. I used the white on white print from Peachy Keen for this quilt. And any of my other white on white fabrics from my previous lines will work beautifully with Peachy Keen. Any of the white on whites from Coriander Seeds would work. And if you wanted to use a white solid, the white solid that I like to use is Off-White, the Bella solid called Off-White, and that number is 9900-200. So that's a look at this beautiful quilt here. And behind me, I have Jelly Roll Patchwork. Let me grab the pattern for that one. This quilt is going to finish at 56 by 62, so it is a little bit smaller than the first two quilts I shared with you. And I designed it to work with a jelly roll, as you could probably tell from the name Jelly Roll Patchwork. But if you had squares, 2.5-inch squares, and 2.5 by 6.5-inch rectangles in your scrap bin, sometimes we have little leftover bits from our jelly rolls, this quilt could be made from your scrap basket using those two sizes of squares and rectangles. If you watched the Peachy Keen Fabrics video, you got a peek of this quilt in the background of that video. And this quilting design, I think, is my favorite quilting design that we used for any of these new quilts. It's called Circles Nested, and David did them in, I think this is probably about a 1-inch size, about the size of a quarter. And I love the way it fits into the shapes in this quilt. I love the way it looks on here. Some of you commented that you think it reminds you of Legos, and that wasn't even something that I thought about, but it does kind of have a Lego or a bubble wrap sort of appearance, and I just love the way that turned out. Now we'll slide this over so you can see the borders. It is this little medium blue basic print. For these quilts in the borders, for a couple of them, you notice that I've chosen some of the smaller scale prints for the borders, which is a little bit different than what I often do. But what I was finding with these quilts is that using that smaller scale print allowed more of the background fabric to show, and I thought it really framed out the edges of these quilts so nicely. The binding fabric is the coral stripe, and then that bouquet fabric on the dark blue for the back of this one. Now, if you wanted to scrap this up from your scrap bin, I mentioned you needed 2.5-inch squares and then 2.5 by 6.5-inch rectangles. You would need 120 of the rectangles and 288 of the squares. And all of that information is of course listed in the pattern, but I just wanted you to be aware that these do make great scrap busting patterns. I like to design quilts that work well with pre-cuts, but it's also very nice to know that you do not have to purchase a pre-cut. If you have an overflowing scrap bin and you want to work from your scrap basket, you certainly could do that with these first 3 quilt patterns. Now, I also have a yardage based pattern hanging behind me right here. I have added Barn Star 6 to my lineup of Barn Star patterns. The first 5 patterns have been very popular, and I shared a video on those earlier, probably late fall, a few months ago. So I'll link to that if you want to see those other Barn Star patterns. They are 40-inch square little wall hanging or table topper sized quilts and just one block pattern. So they do come together nice and quick. They use just a bit of yardage, and it is a wonderful way to just create something a little bit pretty, maybe to hang over your couch, to top your table, to hang above your bed, or something like that. The other thing that I've seen people using these patterns for is for little baby quilts. So they do make a very nice quick to piece baby quilt. The quilting on this one is called Sticky Orange Peel. You know I love a good orange peel quilting design. This is a new one that we tried out. It has what you would expect with the orange peel, but then it also kind of tucks in these little teardrop shapes on the center of these quilting motifs. And it's just a really nice additional touch to a regular orange peel quilting design. This quilt has a very narrow border with the large scale floral, that coral stripe again on the binding. And for the backing, it's the large scale floral on the white. And that is Barn Star 6. I have one final quilt to share with you from this collection, and it's a little mini quilt. Hanging behind me is the Jelly Sticks mini quilt. I have a Jelly Sticks main quilt, regular quilt, that I released with my Buttercup and Slate line of fabric, and it utilizes a jelly roll. The Jelly Sticks mini quilt utilizes a charm pack, or if you have 1.5 by 2.5 inch rectangle strips hanging in your scrap basket, you could use those to piece this quilt as well. I am going to show you the quilting on this one. I just machine quilted it on my sewing machine here at home, and I'm going to lay it beside the regular Jelly Sticks pattern so you can see the difference in the two sizes. Here you can see the size difference between the original Jelly Sticks quilt and then the new mini Jelly Sticks quilt. This is one of the blocks on the original. You can see right here, and then the same block in the little mini. And I made this quilt from start to finish in a recent video. So if you want to see me make this one up, I used a stash of my vintage sheets that I collected over the years. I'll link to the video down below so you can see this one come to life. This one was a fun one with Minky on the back and that beautiful quilting. I think it turned out so pretty. But I love this little table topper size as well. This little guy, he finishes at 24 inches square, making it a really nice little table topper, or maybe on top of a coffee table. It's just a nice little size. Using the charm pack makes it pretty quick to piece. If you wanted to use from your stash, you would need 224 of those 1.5 by 2.5 inch rectangles, plus a little bit of background fabric, your backing, and then your binding. I'll show you that backing. I used the Peaches print. I'm gonna switch this around so it's right side up, the Peaches print from Peachy Keen, and I think that was such a nice touch for the back of this quilt. As far as the quilting, I opted to just cross hatch it on my own machine here at home. So I did the quilting for this myself. I do prefer to mark all of my quilting when I machine quilt projects myself, especially if I am straight line machine quilting. So I marked everything and then just stitched it right up. And it was just a fun little project to complete. Both of these quilts do come together quickly, whether you're using the larger quilt that uses the jelly roll or the smaller charm pack quilt. And that is a look at the new Peachy Keen patterns. They are all available in my Etsy shop. I have those linked down below so you can purchase them if you want to. And Peachy Keen fabrics will be available this fall. It is a great time to let your local quilt shops know that you're interested in seeing Peachy Keen fabrics in the fall when they come out. They are able to order them right now for shipment this fall. If you have any questions about any of the quilts, be sure and let me know so I can answer those for you. All of the fabric requirements are listed in the Etsy listing, so if you want to know in advance what exactly you would need to have on hand to make these quilts, that information is available to you. And I thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll catch you again next time.